You know what really makes us mad is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punklottopod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I am your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. I feel like it's weird to point out we don't have guests when we don't have guests multiple weeks in a row.
It is the new normal. It's difficult. It's not a good time of year to try and book guests.
Yeah, bad time of year. Definitely not an easy time to schedule people, but it's fine. We've found that guests don't really affect our numbers that much. So
Don't tell them that.
Uh-oh.
They find out they don't have to do this shit. Oh, you mean it's not helping me at all? Either?
Maybe. Should I edit that out?
I have nothing to offer you except opinion.
Nah, I believe in transparency in podcasting. Except no one will say their numbers.
No one says numbers. Yeah.
No one talks numbers unless you're like really close.
Here's the thing. It's bad. They're bad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's numbers. Unless you're like famous already.
Yeah. You have a built-in audience or you're in a built-in infrastructure.
Yeah.
Basically,
like an NPR podcast or someone huge like that.
If you are not involved with some other entity already or known for your other stuff outside, listens are low for everybody. So it's a flooded market.
And you know what? It's fine.
The barrier of entry is low. So
it should be.
As long as you have a steady amount that grows over time, not a steady amount that shrinks over time. If it shrinks over time, you should probably hang it up. But
yeah, retool. Wow.
But as long as it grows, no matter how slow, you're doing something right. Weird little podcast pep talk here at the top, but here we are.
Your affirmation. Start a podcast.
As my cats make some.
You can always do like 2 episodes and quit.
Yeah.
You know, no one has to know you did it. Don't promote it. I still don't tell the majority of people I know that I do a podcast. It's my secret shame.
When I went and saw our friend's new band play live right before they played, he saw me and he goes, "This guy's got a podcast," and I was like, "Don't tell people that."
I'm only going to college for broadcasting because of doing a podcast.
Those are the people I will be like,
anybody.
Here's what I do. Yeah. Don't just tell strangers. You don't know who to give that information to. Oh, what's it called?
So it's got a really dumb name that doesn't really make any sense anymore.
What do you talk about? Music. Oh, cool. You won't like them.
The old wrong take twins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're not twins. We are brothers. If you're listening to the show and you don't know much about us, our voices are very difficult to distinguish. We are not twins. We actually look pretty different.
Like not related, different.
Yeah.
I don't think our voices sound that much alike anymore since we've changed microphones over the years.
Yeah. Our speech patterns are definitely, there are some similarities.
Oh, yeah. For sure. But that's not why you tuned in. Yeah, so if you want to hear more of that silly rambling, head over to our Patreon, and for $1 you get access to all of our bonus audio. This week we will be doing an I'm Listening, where we talk about the albums we've listened to since the last time we did an I'm Listening, which at this rate was like 2 weeks ago. But I think we're going to pare that down just so we're not like, all right, we've got 25 albums each to talk about.
In truth, I don't know how much I have to talk about because I have listened to quite a lot of jazz in the last month. So, yeah. Slim pickings.
Look forward to that.
You want to hear me run down my favorite ESP discs from 1966?
I've been listening to a lot of 2022 stuff, so I'll balance it out with some new talk. I got a few 86 stuff I could probably talk about as well that I don't think will make it to a Dance of Days.
Let me see. Let me look at my before we promise that we're gonna do this, and then it turns out I have nothing to talk about. Let me look at my top albums of the last month and see what I feel confident that I could talk about. Let's see. Yeah, I got plenty.
You got plenty.
Got enough to talk about that our listeners will want to hear me talk about.
Yeah. Well, you better. We're trying to sell this thing. Yeah. That's over on our Patreon. Today's a little loosey-goosey, I guess, because we're doing that thing where we stall and don't want to talk about the record.
Uh-oh. If you've seen the title of this episode already, and you're a super fan.
Whoa. No. I actually have a rich variety of takes and opinions on this record. So
yeah.
There's stuff there. We're on all forms of social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at punklottopod, email address punklottopod@gmail.com. We have a voicemail line is 202-688-PUNK, Substack, punklottopod.substack.com. Those are all the plugs. So let's get those out of the way before we move along. So, okay. We were like, okay, what are we doing? We've done a lot of 90s. We've done a lot of 2000s lately. And I'm living in the 80s currently with my Dance of Days project. So I don't really want to pick anything from the 80s. Dylan will probably wind up picking the next 80s thing just for that specific reason. Then I think we're going to do, while Dylan's not recording with me next week, we'll have a substitute co-host, and we're going to do something from the 2010s on that episode. So we were like, well, 70s we haven't hit in a minute, and you were down to do something from the 70s. So I gave you the year 1979 because it was the one hadn't done in the longest. It's been almost a year. It was November that we did it last year. It was either
76 or 79, and there's nothing left in 76. We are so close to just retiring that year. We figured there were big records that we hadn't touched from 76 that would be ideal to leave for like a guest.
But I'm half tempted to say when we hit episode like 250, we just do 76 to retire it.
We just do a
special Bon Voyage farewell 1976.
Just crushing six pack and slam it through 76.
Yeah. So we were like, okay, 79. It's been a year since we've done 79. What have we talked about from 1979 in the past? Well, we've done a couple things. So let's see. We've done this year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Oof. The first one we did Punishment of Luxury, Laughing Academy, and The Addicts, Lunch with the Addicts.
A case in point for why we don't randomly select albums anymore.
Yeah, that record was bad, and it didn't perform well, and it was just like, cool. I think it's one of our lowest listened episodes from that era. That was also episode 11, so way back. Then we came back to it in episode 32 with the Buzzcocks, A Different Kind of Tension, and Sudden Fun's self-titled EP, Sudden Fun. Whenever we did all of those, because I could see all of those like EPs we did right here, they all sounded like the same band. The Carpettes, the Deadbeats, the Suzannes, Sudden Fun. It was like the same band over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But that was the final Buzzcocks album until they reunited, right? That was the deal. Then we didn't touch it again until episode 99. And that was the Germs GI with comic artist Jay Gonzo. That was a fun episode. That was a big record to do.
Yeah.
That episode's in our top 10 most listened episodes too. Then in episode 122, we did the UK Subs, Another Kind of Blues. That's where we figured out their whole thing and why they have so many albums forever.
Yeah, do you feel like they kept going because they were like, we have to do the whole alphabet?
I think so. Once they got to like pretty far, like H, they were probably like, well, we just got to keep going. It's just been the same lead singer, but as far as I think everybody else has just been new people, coming in and out of the band. So that's easy to do as long as the lead singer wants to tour forever and never have a real life. And the last time we did it was episode 155 with the Undertones self-titled album. So what else came out in 79?
Well, let me see. What did I consider before we talk about the big records? There were a couple of records that I thought about.
Yeah, you were shooting a couple names at me this week.
Here we go. Here are the screenshots that I took, records that I was considering. Briefly considered New Values by Iggy Pop. Mostly just because I don't know anything about that one.
I was going to say, which one even is that one?
He's shirtless with the purple background.
Is it not a Bowie record?
It is the no, it's produced by James Williamson. It is the record. It's the next record after the Bowie records. After the first two. I mean, Kill City came out after, but was made up of older recordings. But yeah, this is the next record after Lust for Life. So I was like, all right, I've listened to the first two Iggy Pop records this year. I would be curious to keep going with him and see what the next record is. It's got a pretty good rating.
It's 45 minutes long. Though I guess Lust for Life is 41 minutes and the Idiot's 38. Breezy 38.
But
Though I guess the record we talked about today is 44 minutes. So
yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean,
ultimately wasn't quite feeling it, but I threw a kind of an oddball at you in a model room by P Model. P Model were a Japanese new wave post-punk, synth-punk, really interesting band. I've listened to some of their records. This is a really good record. I do recommend it, especially if you like early Devo, early XTC, that kind of stuff.
You're always threatening me with P Model.
Yeah, well, because no one's ever going to pick them, and someday we're going to get into it.
And P Model and Pylon, those are the ones that you're always like, they're pretty good.
Those are good bands. Well, I got Pylon.
Yep.
I thought about A Can of Bees by the Soft Boys. I thought that might be a good kind of almost kind of a punk adjacent, a really early punk adjacent record. One of those bands that weirdly kind of hard to categorize, like early neo-psych, sort of post-punk, kind of an art rock band. I like some of their stuff. I am not familiar with that record. And we had a good discussion on, and this was one of the bigger contenders. Ultimately, it came down between this one and the record I picked. But I did suggest Head Injuries by Midnight Oil, which is their second album. It's pretty well regarded. But I do think that ultimately our conversation was, is it that record? And it's not the first record, and it's not one of their 80s records where they have a string of maybe like 3 records in a row in the 80s that are kind of the most essential records, the best examples of Midnight Oil, I think. But
they've always been a band that I really want to do a deep dive on and like listen to their stuff, but I've also never known where to go with their discography.
I have listened to their 82 record 10987. It just counts down. I'm not going to say all of the numbers. You know the numbers from 1 to 10. It's a bad album name. Great record, though. It's a really good record.
Yeah. It seems like the most popular ones are Blue Sky Mining, Diesel and Dust, and that one, 10-9-8-7-6-5-4-3-2-1. If you say it real fast, it's not that bad. Yeah. I don't know. They also have a lot of records. Like, they went a long time. Are they done? Or are they one of those ones that still goes, too?
They are technically still together. I think the last thing they put out a record this year.
Oh, called Resist. They're also a very political band.
Yeah,
which is cool. Yeah, I need to hear more of their stuff. I just know the big songs. Which are there more than one big songs?
Maybe not in the U.S. I don't know.
Yeah, Beds of Burning has 215 million plays, and the rest are like 30 million, 22 million, 17 million, 12 million, which is still high, but well, a little bit more context on 1979. So this is what punk is dead, right?
I don't know. I don't know what the cultural perception of punk. I mean, the Clash were definitely still a big band, but I guess you could potentially argue that punk is selling out in 79.
Yeah, so like let's look at the pure punk records. We got London Calling by the Clash.
And I mean, you know, how pure of a punk record is that? They do so much experimenting on that record.
Yeah.
it's a double album, and
Yeah. The Slits Cut, which is pretty important record. The Damned's Machine Gun Etiquette, important for them because it was they're coming back and be like, no, ignore that last one. Stiff Little Fingers and Inflammable Material. The Undertones did the self-titled. I think it's the year of the bands who held out.
yeah, interestingly, there are no Ramones records.
Yeah.
In '79, probably because they were being tortured by Phil Spector recording End of the Century.
Yeah.
I guess we're in a weird. I think '79 is a little more pure than maybe is an accurate descriptor. I mean, it's definitely people who are over it trying to go in new directions and do weird stuff. New wave is kind of solidifying as a genre, but there are definitely bands who kept going. So we're past that first wave of like, oi, this is the new trend. We're punk, jumping on it. And
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those bands, kind of those also ran bands, would put out more records into the 80s, but
yeah, it's a lot of bands shifting into post-punk at this point. Gang of Four's Entertainment came out that year, which is probably their most important record. It's their first record. See, they were kind of a holdout too, though. Like '79. I mean, post-punk started in '77, so that's a thing. But like, Gang of Four are almost considered like one of the pillars of post-punk. Who else would be in that pillar? Would you put Joy Division in there?
yeah, I mean, yeah, they're definitely if there's one post-punk band that every post-punk band is influenced by, it's probably Joy Division. So
yeah. So let's say 4 pillars of post-punk would be Joy Division, Gang of Four, our band we're talking about today. Now, who's that 4th pillar of post-punk?
Talking Heads?
Nah, they're too many other things.
Are they too American?
The Fall? They're not as mainstream, though.
But they are very informative of the current post-punk trend. So I don't know that their impact was like immediate. They were very much doing their own thing for a really long time.
Yeah.
As far as like who set the stage for 80s post-punk?
Is it Public Image Limited?
Probably.
Meh.
And I mean, yeah, especially as being like kind of a first class of punk shifting into post-punk with John Lydon.
Yeah, because I wouldn't really put Echo as a pillar, and The Cure either. Maybe Susie and the Banshees. Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, Susie are so much more important to like goth rock as a genre.
Yeah, that's why I was like, probably not The Cure or Bauhaus.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's the 4 pillars, and that 4th pillar is a little wobbly. You got to put a match book underneath it. There's 2 Crass records that year. Stations of the Crass and Feeding of 5,000. So there's your like true punks. Is Crass our first example of true punks?
Well, I don't know. Germs. I mean.
Yeah, I guess in the UK. I guess what I'm thinking. I mean, yeah, in the US we got the Germs. What else we got coming out of here?
If you look at the EPs, there's probably something pretty important.
Yeah, that might be more important for America. Yeah, we got Black Flag's Nervous Breakdown, Horror Business by the Misfits.
Yeah, so early hardcore, really.
Yeah, that's kind of it though. Wow. The Avengers self-titled 7-inch. It's surprising. I guess just in American hardcore, it just like took off at one time. Like everybody did it at the same time. Because is it 80 is when it really blows up here? Yeah, 80s, Fresh Fruit, Los Angeles. Is it real? Even then, it's still not very like Circle Jerks. Why did it take so long in the States to really pop off?
I mean, I think it was going on, but maybe it's not. The records aren't coming out.
Yeah.
At the rate that they would, just because no one wants to put those records out. The only people who are putting records out are the ones who are doing it themselves. So you get SST and Discord, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And Discord not even in 1980 yet. So.
You did say there's no Ramones record. There is. It's Alive. Came out that year.
Oh, that's right.
They made money that year.
and a significant record in its own right. It's one of the more essential punk live records, I guess.
Is it?
I mean, who else had put out any punk live albums in the late 70s?
That same year, we've got nobody.
Yeah.
John Cale, the Stranglers, Heartbreakers. Yeah. Because I think the live record was also a signal of like major label excess. Well, you put out this big live stadium album. Apologies to anyone in England who actually found this episode at random.
I want to go deeper on the charts.
What's back there?
Like I feel like there's something we haven't put our finger on in 79.
What's missing? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, but it doesn't go anywhere. Like you can't. There's a Boys record.
The Ruts.
It.
Ian Drury and the Blockheads. Great Rock and Roll Swindle came out that year. What's missing? What if we go new wave? Because this website separates new wave from punk, even though new wave is a subgenre of punk. Stupid website.
Yeah, I mean, new wave is really just an amalgam of genres. So
The Police, Elvis Costello, The Attractions, Blondie, Eat to the Beat, Cars, Candy-O, Patti Smith's Wave, Manifesto by Roxy Music. Man, it's not even like new wave. It's like still its infancy as well. Squeeze is Cool for Cats.
a record of interest to punks, I guess. Overkill by Motorhead.
Yeah.
The Pleasure Principle by Gary Newman. The Specials by The Specials.
There you go. There we go.
That's what's missing.
Yeah. Our two-tone.
That's the other big thing happening in 79. And I knew I knew there had to be something.
It's probably even more important than what's actually coming out of like the punk scene. Or because the Specials were coming out of the punk scene. Yes, they had their like England had their scenes where everybody dressed the certain way. The mods and the chavs and the punks and the what were the Specials people called? Were they mods too? Because they wore suits.
Yeah, I mean they would have been associated.
Rude
but I don't
boys.
know. Mods are like into the Who, and
Yeah.
Skinheads and Rudies are kind of their own little scene.
So 79 good year, bad year? There's so many like important records that year that it's hard to say it's a bad year, but like once you scratch the surface of like the 10, 15 most important albums, but I guess those 10, 15 albums became iconic albums too. So it's hard to really even compare because it's like, well, these are special albums that were going to stand out regardless of what year they came out in. So you kind of have to look at like the next tier down, and it's not that strong, I feel. Once you're like past the iconic records.
It's artier. Yeah. Which ties into the record that we're talking about. I mean, it's like the Raincoats, Chrome. I mean, even the B-52s had like kind of an art scene. It was such a like theatrical performance.
Yeah. Which is the first B-52s record.
Swell Maps.
Yeah. Pop group.
There's a Devo record. There's a magazine record.
Yeah. It is. It's artier. What's Two Boy Army sound like? It looks like Kraftwerk.
They're very synthy as far as I know, but I'm not very familiar. So something to be admired about 79 is that there is a willingness to experiment, and we don't get into the really hard-lined definitions of punk that, as much as there's like amazing, American hardcore, really important records that are really thought-provoking and creative and challenging, it as a genre homogenized.
Yeah.
And turned a lot of people away from punk because it was like, you can't do anything that's like arty or feminine or weak.
Yeah. Okay, well we're getting arty, so let's talk about the record then. So I gave you the year 1979 and you selected 154 by Wire.
Facial movement to the try. torture to people in a room. The weapons are chosen, but the action is frozen. Two people in move positions are shifted. The ceasefire lifted. The light is fierce. It's intended to pierce any cloak of deceit and the current of truth. My God, they're so gifted. My God, they're so gifted. My God, they're so gifted.
Some stats on the band. They formed in London, England in 1976. They released their first album, Pink Flag, in 1977 and invented post-punk. They followed up with their second album, Chairs Missing, in 1978 and released this album September 1979 on EMI Records, imprint Harvest Records, and Warner Brothers in the United States. This is their third full-length album, and the personnel is Colin Newman on guitar and vocals, Graham Lewis on bass and vocals, B.C. Gilbert on guitar, and Robert Gray, a.k.a. Robert Go-To-Bed, on drums. And the album was produced by Mike Thorne, who also performs the synths and keys on this record, and he had produced their previous two albums as well. Okay, so it's Artie. First thing, always ask, what made you choose 154?
There were a couple of factors. One, we had this record on our poll list for a long time, and no one would pick it. So I thought, well, we should finally do this record, since for a really long time we were considering talking about this record.
Mm.
I also was interested because in my own personal listening, I'm going through 77, and was due to hit Pink Flag, which came out in December of 77. So I was like, well, okay, I'll just go ahead and jump the gun because there's not a ton of stuff in November and December left on the, in my year, and I'm not as focused on that. So I was like, I'll go ahead and do that record and compare. I figured I'm thinking about Wire. Let's go ahead and get all of it down at one time. And I recently saw someone tweet 154 is the best Wire record. And I was like, oh, really? I've heard it before. I'm inclined to say no, it's not, though it is very good. But so I wanted to put that to the test and see what's my ranking. But yeah, I don't know. I figured Wire's an important band, and for some reason we haven't touched them significantly on the show. So
we haven't touched them because we don't really assign guests the 70s because they don't really care about the 70s, and they have a lot of other records, but no one cares about anything past the 70s really when it comes to Wire.
And we still have two other Wire records that someone can choose in the future if they are willing to. Yeah. I'm not going to pick another Wire record
ever again.
Yeah. Mostly because I'm going to put most of my thoughts on the first three Wire records on this episode.
Yeah, we'll probably never do another episode of Wire just solo. So it'll be like if a guest wants it, so we can have their take. Because this might be our Wire
Wirepedia.
Yeah. So I was trying to remember. I think I've heard all three of the first. Yes, I know I've heard all three of the first records. The kind of classic era, because then like they break up later. They reunite, of course, very soon after that, but they were done after 154 for the time being. And so it's considered the classic era. I don't know any other Wire record that is viewed as like, oh, that's important or that's essential listening. Now that's what I call music, because if you look at like the Ideal Copy and A Bell Is a Cup Until It is Struck, those might be the next two most important Wire records, but not by all. It's like 87 and 88 when those come out.
Well, yeah, because I mean those are the first two records after the reunion.
Yeah. So I've heard the required listening Wire records, and so I've heard 154, and I couldn't remember like exactly when I listened to it, but also at the same time listening to it again, I was like, I have no memory of any of these songs. Because there's something just about this album that refuses to stick in my brain. I don't know. Okay, what did you think of this album?
Okay, let me think about how do I approach this. My previous opinion of this record was that it was great, or maybe not great, but really good, and underrated. I would not have put it above Chairs Missing. I might have put it above Pink Flag. If you asked me to rank the first 3 Wire records prior to this week, I might have tried to be like, 154 is better than Pink Flag. But I listened to the first, well, actually, I really did go through their first 5 records this week.
This week?
Yeah.
That's a lot of Wire.
So I was just like, well, I'm going to do Pink Flag. So I was like, I may as well just keep going in chronological order. I would not rank 154 above Pink Flag. I would rank it probably third in their discography overall. I would say Chairs Missing, Pink Flag, this, probably A Bell Is a Cup, and then The Ideal Copy. But I'm a little softer on those later records. I was not paying a ton of attention to them, in all honesty. But yeah, so like my previous listen to this record was kind of on its own, out of context of their discography and not being super into them when I listened to this record before. So I didn't have really firm opinions about any Wire records. They were still very much kind of a mystery of a band to me as far as like what their deal is, what their appeal is. But putting this record into context and knowing a little bit more about them, I think they made the right choice breaking up after this record. It certainly gave them credibility in coming back. I don't know where they could have gone after this record. When you look at how the first 3 records progress, you have this almost like riveted, like machinist version of punk. This is the formula for a punk song, and we're going to play it very short and fast, and it's not going to have a lot of dynamics, and it's not going to have a lot of parts per song. It's going to be very stripped down, and it's just very mechanical. And then they break on the next record, they almost kind of like break song form entirely, with like a lot of tracks being like tone poems, just these like, kind of ambient tracks. But they also like splice in these like really template songs where it's like, this is one idea, and that's the whole song. And it's like really catchy or has something really important to say or kind of like a statement to make. But if there's not a lot of bells and whistles to it. And then this record dismantles their songwriting even more, to where there's maybe 3 songs with hooks, a handful of songs that are up tempo. I don't know. If they had stayed together, I can't imagine they could have done anything other than like a frippin' Eno, like, ambient art rock record. I don't know what they could have done, which is kind of what some of the members did do with their own material afterwards. But I think breaking up and then coming back, they could kind of rebuild the template of Wire as a band and what kind of songs they would write.
So it's listening to this record, I don't know, I'm kind of torn. When I actively am listening and I'm engaging with the record, I'm like, some cool stuff here. I really like this song. I like what they're doing here. I like what they're doing there. But then when I'm done listening to the record and I just am like reflecting back, I'm like, did I like that? I can't recall the songs as well. And there's no hooks. It's a very hook free record. There's only like 1 or 2 spots where I feel like there's actually a really strong hook. So like I can't like bring myself back to the record when I'm not actively listening to it. So when I'm actively listening to it, I'm like, this is good. This is good. This is good. I stop listening to it and I'm like, did I even like that? Which I have proof that I liked it, because my notes in the moment as listening to it, I have positive things to say about most of the songs on the record. So, and I feel like that it's just like it evaporates the second. I don't know. I have a hard time just hanging on to this album. And I think you have to, when judging or deciding on an album, you have to be like, well, what does the moment say versus later? Like your thoughts on it reflecting later. Because it applies to almost everything that you like enjoy and appreciate. Like reviewing something the second you saw it or listened to it is not going to give you the same review as if you waited like a week to think about it or talk about it. And so I like it when I'm listening to it. I don't like it when I'm not listening to it. It's kind of how I feel.
It seems as if someone was watching over it before it was, as if response was based on fact, providing, deciding it was soon there. Square to it, face to it. It was not there. Renewed its thoughts as if it had a cause to live for. Denied it learned as if it had sooner been destroyed. Providing, deciding. Was soon there. Square to it, face to it. It was not there.
Yeah, I think that this is a record that is. I think that this is a record that you could compare to like process art. Like or like Dadaism and a lot of that, and I mean, which probably was a big influence, you know, they were art school kids, but a lot of that contemporary art that is about the way that it's made or the textures that are used or the way that it's presented rather than the object that is made from it or the image that it conveys. It can be non-representative and kind of abstract, and this record in particular is much more abstract than any other Wire records I've heard. I don't know what any of these songs are about. I can listen to some of the other stuff and go like, okay, I think I know what they're saying here. I know what kind of statements they're making. This record, I don't get any real statements, which is, I think, part of what makes it difficult to attach yourself to. You have like, not only do you not have these like melodies that you want that you can repeat, you don't really have any lyrics you can repeat either. It's very formless and it's not improvised, but it's definitely written in such a way that it's trying to avoid repetition almost. Even by being repetitive, it's being like repetitive of an idea that you can't duplicate later, that you can't recall. And I feel like it forces you to, I think you do have to base your opinion of this record on how it makes you feel while you listen to it.
Well, it's also the only way I can really recall what's happening too, is if I'm actively listening to it. Like I can describe what's happening, but then when it's over, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of ambient and kind of angular. Like it's like the two moods. And then there's like one really catchy pop song on the whole thing.
Yeah. If I look at the track listing, there's like 3 songs that I can sort of recall the melody or like some rhythmic part, or that I would describe as like even like some of their best songs. 2 People in a Room,
mm-hmm.
The 15th, and then the like least song title-y song, which I think is really funny. Map ref 41 degrees north, 93 degrees west.
Yeah.
Sounds like an ELO song.
It does. Yeah, I was like, this is power pop for sure.
It is so poppy and catchy, and it's such a non-song title. It's really funny.
It was the only single for the record too.
Yeah.
And so it was like, even the label's like, oh, yeah, that's a thing too. But the label's like, yeah, this is the obvious single. I was like, but also it's not the obvious single because it doesn't fit with anything else on the record. So is that a good single? Or are you just literally only trying to sell a single?
Which in the UK, yeah, you could just be trying to sell a single. But also, I wouldn't put it past the label to be like, oh, we got this droning, spacey, mumbling art rock record with like 2 or 3 actual songs on it. Let's put the pop song out and hopefully we'll trick people into buying the album.
Which to me, if like I heard that song and that's the only song I knew, and then I got this record, I'd be mad. What did they B-side it with? That's pretty important. Let's see. It wasn't released. It was just released as a 12-inch sampler.
They did a sampler with I Should Have Known Better, Map Ref, Blessed State, the 15th, on Returning. They also did a single with Map Ref backed with Go Ahead, which is a non-album song.
They're listed in this weird order on Discogs. Yeah, there it is. So what is that non-album song? A Question of Degree was also released in 79. Is that?
So the B-side, I just sampled it really quick. It's 4 minutes long. It is basically just drone and drums.
Okay.
So,
well, okay. If you bought the single, you would have got that B-side and been like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Is the record going to sound like this? Yeah. So mentioning the label earlier, apparently EMI at the time was unhappy with this record. They had done a shakeup in personnel. And so now the people in charge were not down with whatever Wire were doing, which made me think, man, is this the first time in punk history where the top of the label changed and all of a sudden nobody's interested in the band anymore? That would happen a lot in the 90s. But I guess I could see if like you signed the band off of Pink Flag and you're like, let's get more Pink Flags, and you're not getting anything like that record twice now.
No, yeah, because I love Chairs Missing. I think it's a great record from beginning to end. And I like the experimental stuff. I like the arty, drony, weird stuff that they do on that record. But only like half of that record is comparable to Pink Flag. Like sonically, like in terms of like doing the upbeat, having kind of the catchy melodies, and having the like condensed krautrock tempo beat thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, only, there's weird stuff on Chairs Missing that I can absolutely see that being a turnoff if your introduction to the band was Pink Flag.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So I saw this quote from Colin Newman, and he said they wanted to experiment with the marketing for the record. And he said, we'd worked out a sales strategy for 154 that EMI couldn't see at all. They couldn't understand a rock band that wanted to do a week in a theater as an event and wanted to promote 154 with videos or left field TV adverts. We wanted to help them sell records. They thought we were simply being intransigent. So they wanted videos and left field TV adverts. So I guess in England, they probably would have been like, no, we want you on Top of the Pops and Old Grey Whistle Test. Like, we don't want you doing, because MTV wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
Left field. So that would have, I don't even know what that would be as far as creatively. So even then they were in the marketing. They were like, nah, don't market us like you market everybody else. So obviously they're like, we're done with you. We don't want to do anything else with you. They didn't do the next record, which was way later too. So the title 154 is also in reference to the number of live shows they had played up to that point when the record came out. So they'd done 154 shows. And prior to this record, they had done a tour with Roxy Music of Europe. And their response to it was like, it was just kind of awkward and we didn't love it. And so they didn't tour in support of this album either, because they said half the band didn't want to tour at all. Like 2 of them wanted to stay home. And he said that whoever the interview was like, yeah, I think it was their personal life stuff and they were trying to like stay home for that kind of stuff. And they were all sort of drifting apart anyway at that point. So I think everybody was like, yeah, whatever. We're all interested in doing something solo now anyway. So it feels like a record that a band about to break up puts out too,
It's funny that they toured with Roxy Music, because there's a lot of moments on here that feel like they're aping Roxy.
Yeah.
It's definitely the more like melodic and like song forward parts. It feels like they're doing Roxy impressions. And I mean, you can definitely see like an Eno influence on like the ambience and the texture and Even some of like the little odd guitar parts sound very much like Brian Eno, kind of the kind of guitar parts on his records. But yeah, it's I hesitate to say it's a weird record because I get what they're doing, and to me weird feels like something I don't understand, or like a choice I wouldn't make. And I certainly can see how they arrived at the conclusions that they did and made the choices that they did for this record. And I think it would have been cool as a performance, almost as like a performance art piece, for them to have had the marketing done the way that they wanted, because that sounds like really, there could have been some really cool content that would have been generated, adjacent to it, with music videos and just like weird I'm imagining they're just doing these like weird commercial spots, really experimental commercial spots. I don't know what that could even really be, but would absolutely add to the whole, like, almost like the rejection of commodification, and the like de-emphasizing the songs themselves and more the atmosphere and the experience of listening to it and consuming it. It's unfortunate that didn't happen the way that they wanted, because that would have been very unique.
Yeah. I could also see EMI be like, and you're not even going to tour? God, what are you? It's a tough spot but also at the same time, it's EMI. They were like a gigantic record label. They had huge bands on there. It's like they could afford to take a little loss on Wire,
Yeah, it's a thing where I feel like it would have required them to figure things out because they can't just go through their normal marketing and distribution channels, and they can't rely on their payola people.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's always the thing that happens, though. Like, you have to wonder what a major label is even doing with an art band like this.
Well, in England, it's because they were scooping up all the punk bands, and then they just turned into an art band while they were under their label. They weren't an art. I mean, they were arty, but not in the way that they wanted them to be arty,
Yeah, and I mean, they're not David Bowie.
Yeah.
They're not still putting out pop singles. I mean, they did have a pop single on here, but
yeah. I wonder if it was written specifically to be a pop single for them. Like, let's give something like that.
Was it
by direction
at the direction
label?
Of the label, or did they write it independently and were like, yeah, we'll put it on there?
Because I could see both, because it's so drastically different from the rest of the record that it could have been just them being like, let's throw this weird Cars type song on here.
An unrulable expanse of geography, an aerial photographer, overexposed to the cartologist, to the image's nose, the areas where the water flows, so petrified the landscape grows. Sliding I try to understand the words insisting hand, the carving and the bearing of the lands, the quarters where the graph divides.
There's a degree of intention. There seems to be a degree of intention to it with them giving it that song title.
Yeah.
It's cheeky.
Which it was also meant to be an estimate for the center of the American Midwest, but it was also one of them figured out the exact degrees. but it was apparently very close to Centerville, which actually is considered. So like his estimate was pretty close. But it's just like, why are you trying to decide what that is? He's looking at a map and being like, I think that's the center. So they're a band who has 3 songwriters. There are 4 people in the band, 5 really though, if you count their producer. But 4 songwriters in the band, so it's that they're trying to split their like writing space, and they're talking about space was limited on those records, so you're kind of competing with each other to get songs on the album. And looking at, there's a lot of songs where it's like one guy will write the lyrics, but the other will write the music. And I don't even know. I assume whoever did the lyrics is who sings the songs, but I could be wrong with that too. So when I was basing my, like, looking at the track listing, going, what did I like, what did I not like? I'm like, I like that, I like that, I like that. Oh, okay, those are the same guy. I don't like that one as much. It's like, oh, okay, those are the other guy. I think I like Colin Newman's songs more.
I was gonna say, all of the songs that stand out to me that I really like, Colin wrote the music.
Yeah, and the ones that I'm like, Graham Lewis wrote those.
Yeah,
and he wrote, like, and you can tell that they're written because they're bass forward songs too.
I mean, yeah, there's A Touching Display is the 7-minute sludge song.
Yeah,
in the middle of this record. That's a Graham Lewis song.
Yeah, the opening track, I Should Have Known Better,
which is
Gilbert.
Okay, but it's not a good opener.
No, I think it's a bad opener.
I think it's a good song, but it should have been sequenced later in the record.
Yeah, I would have taken a different song to start off with. But I say Newman's my favorite, but then he also, like, he does the last 2 tracks on there, and I feel like those are 2 of the most forgettable songs on the whole record.
They are.
Indirect Inquiries and 40 Versions. 40 Versions co-written by Bruce Gilbert. Gilbert only gets, he co-wrote The Other Window with Graham. And so it's like, it feels like a Graham song, but it's a little better. Slightly better. And then Gilbert wrote Blessed State. And that one was I actually like Blessed State. It's a pretty upbeat, fun one.
I really like that song. That is it's one of the more subdued and unique sounding songs on the record, but I really like it. I really like that chorusy guitar line. And yeah, he does co-write 40 Versions with Colin Newman at the end of the record though.
Yeah. Lewis and Newman both write single KO, and it kind of feels a little like both their song. Newman writes more overall, but if you look at the lyrics, it's a little bit more evenly split, I think. Gilbert has a couple more lyric tracks. It's an interesting way to write music. To me, it's very strange to be like, all right, well, I guess it's not that weird to be like, I wrote the music, you write the lyrics, but usually it's because you only had one singer, or if your singer doesn't play an instrument, you know.
I don't know. I could absolutely see them doing a let's co-write like the Beatles, but like not write Beatles songs.
Yeah, to me the standout tracks are the 15th. I really like the 15th. 2 People in a Room. I like On Returning, which has those weird little like wet blurpy, like I think it's a synth. It's just like a Touching Display.
On Returning has that's right. That's the one with the little like Mario sounding
yeah.
running sounds.
It has Mario sounds on it. And then yeah, Matt Breath. The songs I don't like are just the ones that just kind of like just go on and on. And there's a lot of build up and no resolution on a lot of these, like most of these songs.
Yeah. It's
a very frustrating listen because it's just like, and the song's over. It's like, oh, I feel like we were going somewhere and we didn't get there.
I guess going off of my theory that this song is best rated by how you feel while listening to it, I think it's important to consider the context in which I listened to this record. The first time I listened to it, I distinctly remember driving in Scottsdale on the interstate. So I think I went to North Scottsdale and was driving back home while listening to this record the first time, which this feels very like. This record is easily a cruise control record where you don't have to think about traffic. You're just on the interstate and you can just listen to it. My second context for listening to this record was not ideal, but kind of odd and made me notice the contrasts more. I was very distracted listening to it walking around Amoeba in Hollywood while they were setting up for a dog Halloween costume contest.
In Amoeba?
In Amoeba. So that in that context, I was distracted through the quieter, droning, less dynamic stuff and took notice of the really standout songs, the hookier parts, the more upbeat parts. So, but yeah, I definitely actively thought while listening to it, like, man, I'm not getting much from this. But then skimming it before this episode, I was like, oh, I like that. I like that part. Oh, that's a good part. Oh, this is a better record than I thought. So I'm up and down. Context matters for this one big time.
Yeah.
More than their other records.
Yeah, I think you lose if you're not paying attention. You kind of lose some of the stuff. It doesn't help that a lot of the songs are kind of like this droning, not much going on. I mean, there's a lot there, but you got to listen close to it to hear it, I think. And so if you're like distracted in any way, you're just catching like the low, just the low end stuff. But then like listening to it, I was like, what track is that? It's the one, A Mutual Friend. I was like, is that a clarinet?
It's a cor anglais.
Yeah, it is a cor anglais.
Because there's much more cor anglais.
Which that song also features electric viola and Haley Crystal of the owner of CBGB's on bass vocals.
Now the viola is on A Touching Display.
Oh yeah. I see. Yeah. A Mutual Friend though has Haley Crystal, who owns CBGB's, doing bass vocals on this. Why was he there? CBGB's is in New York. This was recorded in like London. What? How did he get there? Why was he there? Is he buds with Wire?
Maybe. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. Or he was just in England for a trip and happened to be, you want to come down to the studio while Wire's recording? And he's like, sure. And then they're like, you want to sing? It's just a whole like series of like, what is happening? A lot of bands would cite Wire as an influence on them, most notably the Minutemen, Sonic Youth, and the entire DC hardcore scene. But I think the DC scene was more focused on the Pink Flag stuff. Minutemen and Sonic Youth I could see being more influenced by all three of their records at that point. Mike Watt has talked about it pretty extensively, which makes sense. It's a very bass heavy record and Mike's a bass player and he's always talking about the bass. So
yeah, the really abstract Mike Watt stuff in the Minutemen discography feels pretty influenced by the more ambient and abstract songs on Chairs Missing and 154. But the short and fast, really anthemic stuff also from, Pink Flag.
Yeah.
Definitely feel like influences on D Boon. So you do get both sides of that coin from Wire. It's not hard to draw that conclusion.
The album peaked at number 39 on the UK album charts. I think I read that it was actually one of their better performing records, which I'm surprised that this one was, but it could just be momentum was driving them. They would later go on to release 15 more albums, making it 18 albums overall, with their most recent being in 2020, where they released 2 albums, Mind Hive and 1020. 1020 was like originally a Record Store Day exclusive of like songs that didn't fit on other records. I don't know if they're technically a compilation or if they just were written and they were like, they don't fit, we'll just record them all together. But it wound up being released wide later. And besides Robert Gray left briefly in the 90s. And they put out one record as Wire without the E, just WIR, but they still pronounced it Wire. And then he came back, and then later Bruce Gilbert left in 2004 to focus on solo work, and he has not been back in the band since then, which is like weird. Like you leave you leave Wire in 04. It's just like, maybe he just wasn't getting his songs on there the way he wanted to.
Wire So I mentioned that I listened to the first 5. Their immediate post comeback records are interesting to listen to and consider what else was going on in between. And it's interesting. The ideal copy was they used a lot more electronic elements, a lot more sequencers and drum machines and things. And then A Bell is a Cup, they have this, all of the songs have a much slicker, more ethereal quality. They have this, and it's interesting, those 2 records, they sound like a little bit like New Order and a little bit like just like every UK post-punk, cold wave, dark wave kind of band that followed in their wake. So it's really interesting to hear how they kind of created post-punk and then dipped out right for like the 80s post-punk explosion happens. And then come back and they're like, they sound like all of the bands that they inspired more than they sound like themselves. It's weird. It definitely makes their later stuff feel less essential though.
Yeah. Well, they waited out the most like booming period for that sound too. Kind of let New Order take over and everyone else. Well, overall, any closing thoughts on it?
Well, it's not their best.
Final thoughts are, I wish you'd pick that Midnight Oil record. I don't know what it sounds like. I think I would have liked it a little better than this one. It's a tough one. It's probably the most challenging of the 3 original records. It's got its rewarding moments though. It's a hard one to think about. I don't know. Some people are like, it's a classic, and I'm just like, it's in the classic era.
It's canonical. Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't do very much different from Chairs Missing. And I think that everything that they do on Chairs Missing that they do on this record, they do better on Chairs Missing.
Yeah.
That being said, there are some great songs. There really are some great songs on here.
All right. Well, I think that will do it for us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You can follow us on all those social media plugs that I mentioned up top. You can leave us a rating or a review on iTunes, Spotify. And, yeah, send us a message our way. Tell us if you disagree with our take on this record. I don't know. I don't know what our listenership will think of it, but we might have some similar opinions with them. But that'll do it. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next week.